Lesson 1.11. So lesson 11 for module 1 here is on ratios of fractions and their unit rates. Remember, unit rate means per 1. So we're going to be dealing with some different rates and different quantities here, and we're going to focus on how much is it per 1 item or 1 mile or whatever it is. So looking at the first example, wants to know if Meredith is correct. So a turtle walks 7/8 of a mile in 50 minutes. They want to know the unit rate in miles per hour. So Meredith wrote this, 7/8 divided by 5/6. And 7/8 comes from right here, 7/8 of a mile. Where did the 5/6 come from when there's 60 minutes? Or I'm sorry, 50 minutes. Well, it comes out of the fact that there's 50 minutes out of 60 minutes. All right, so if we have 50 minutes out of 60 minutes, that's where that 5/6 come from. You can divide a 10 out of both of them if you want to think of it that way, or just cross out the zeros. So 50 minutes, if we were going to do this, we would do 7/8 of a mile out of 50 minutes, except it wants hour. So that 5/6 represents the hour. Okay, so explain it. We'll just say 5/6 is the fraction that represents 50 minutes out of an hour. So, sorry, sloppy, writing fast. So we're going to be dealing a lot with fractions and unit rates and everything. So let's do this problem and remember all of our rules for dividing fractions and all of that. B here says determine the unit rate when the turtle's speed is expressed in miles per hour. So we're going to take 7/8 over 5/6, and we're going to perform this division. This fraction bar right here, that means to divide. That's one of the ways we write dividing. So basically what I'm doing is I'm going 7/8 divided by 5/6. 7/8 divided by 5/6. Now, think back to how we divide fractions. Dividing the fraction is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. Hopefully, you've heard of this. Keep it, switch it, flip it. That is how we remember dividing by fractions. We're going to keep the 7/8. We're going to switch the division sign to multiplication, and we're going to flip 5/6 into 6/5. Take the reciprocal. So now we're just going to multiply straight across, or we can use, we can cross reduce, meaning I could go 7 times 6 and get 42 over 8 times 5 and get 40, or I can look for divide out common factors. 7 and 5 only have a common factor of 1, but 8 and 6 have a common factor of 2. 2 goes into 8 4 times, 2 goes into 6 3 times. Just a little easier to reduce earlier on in the problem than at the end. 7 times 3 is 21. 4 times 5 is 20. So they're traveling 21 over 20 miles per hour. Or we can switch this around. 20 goes into 21, 1 and 1/20 miles per hour. And I'm just going to abbreviate MPH. Now we could change this to a decimal, but since it gave it to us as fractions to start, I usually tend to leave my answer in that form as well. If they gave us decimals to start, obviously I'd have decimals in my answer. All right, so this is a lot of what we're going to be using today. Okay, because again, we're finding out what it is per 1 hour. All right, let's look at one more video, or one more example for this video. For Anthony's birthday, his mother is making cupcakes for his 12 friends at daycare. That's 1 dozen. 12 makes up a dozen. The recipe calls for 3 1/3 cups of flour, and the recipe makes 2 1/2 dozen cupcakes. But Mom only has 1 cup of flour. Is there enough flour for each of his friends to get a cupcake? So let's figure out how much they need for 1 dozen. Okay, that's what we need here. We know we need 3 1/3 cups for 2 1/2 dozen. Well, how many cups do we need for 1 dozen? So we're gonna set up like that. Let's go. 3 1/3 cups of flour. I'm just gonna write cups per 2 1/2 dozen cupcakes. So we want to do cups per 1 dozen. So we have to again identify this as a division problem. So I'm going to rewrite this as 3 1/3 divided by, with the division sign, 2 1/2. Now, if you think back to when we've divided by fractions before, you don't get to leave them as mixed numbers. We need to change them into improper fractions. So remember, bottom number times whole number plus 1. 3 times 3 is 9 plus 1 is 10, so that becomes 10/3. Divided by, don't try to switch anything until they're both improper fractions. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5/2. Now we can throw in the keep it, switch it, flip it. Don't do that too quick because people will tend to, well, they'll forget to flip things or they'll somehow do the reciprocal wrong. So I'm going to keep the 10/3, switch the division to multiplication, and flip 5/2 into 2/5. Now again, you could multiply straight across and get 20/15, which we know we can divide both of these by 5. And that becomes 4/3. Or, so you guys can see here, 3 and 2 only have a common factor of 1. 10 and 5 have a common factor of 5. 5 goes into itself 1 time, 5 goes into 10 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 1 is 3. So we get 4/3, or 1 1/3 cups per dozen. So, if she only has 1 cup of flour, is there enough for her to make a dozen cupcakes for Anthony's friends? No. Mom needs 1 1/3 cups, sorry, so sloppy as always, of flour to make a dozen cupcakes. All right, so we're going to be using our knowledge of fractions and division of fractions to be finding some unit rates to help us solve problems.